This is the 2023 Marin San Quentin 3. And I've been fortunate enough to log hundreds of miles on this bike over the last few months. And today, I'm gonna tell you what I've learned along the way and let you know if this could potentially be the next best bike for you. And instead of taking it on a jumpy flow line like some of you might have expected I would do, I'm actually gonna be riding one of the techiest enduro trails here in Bend, Oregon, because I think this bike really comes alive in that type of terrain that other people might tell you you shouldn't really be riding a hardtail on. And that also happens to be what Hardtail Gang is all about. Encouraging kooks like us to go out there and have fun riding hardtails and maybe jab a little fun at our full suspension friends along the way. In addition to making a lot of really cool shirts like this one, it's not too late to switch to a hardtail, which I think is hilarious. I'm gonna be wearing this all the time. Mick, who started Hardtail Gang a couple months ago, also makes these fun little signs. I rode this on a hardtail so you control your full suspension friends and set that up along the trail as you're riding. And that's actually what we're gonna do today. Hoping to find a fun little place to plant this on the trail while we're reviewing this Marin San Quentin 3. So let's get out there on the trail, get riding. Today we are doing an out and back on a trail called Funner. Like I said earlier, it's kind of the closest thing we have here in Bend to like an enduro trail. Not a ton of elevation loss on the way back down, but it is pretty technical. And I mentioned at the beginning of the video that this is intentional to take this bike on a bit more of a techie ride today instead of going and riding, you know, a fun jump trail. Like maybe if you saw that first ride on my new Stanton switchback tie, I rode Lower Whoops. Just a fun jump trail with lots of tables and doubles. And don't get me wrong, this Marin San Quentin can definitely handle that. But I do think after spending about 3 months on this bike, that it does best in technical terrain. And I'm gonna get into that a little bit as we go through the video today. So let's start with the geometry. Out of the box, this thing comes with a 64-degree head tube angle, which is pretty slack. I would say anything slacker than 65 degrees places it in the slacker than average category, even for a hardcore hardtail. It's also got a super low bottom bracket of 55 millimeters. Ooh, let's see how this tight little switchback goes. Woo! Oh. And while that slack head tube and low bottom bracket do make it great for descending, it does make it a little harder to jump. Namely because the slack front end kicks that front wheel out super far, which means your suspension is going to compress that much more when you're going up a steep lip. And then the lower bottom bracket, yeah, makes it real stable, but that stability means it's a little harder to pop, right? A little harder to get that front end up and a little harder to whip around once you're in the air. Essentially, the bike just wants to stay low and fast. And as many of you probably know, this bike is co-designed by Matt Jones, professional dirt jump slopestyle rider. So it's kind of interesting that this bike definitely leans more towards the enduro hardtail side of the spectrum. You can maybe even say like free ride hardtail if you build it up right, than it does jibby play bike. The more I think about that though, and seeing the way Matt Jones rides this bike, he definitely likes to push it hard and ride really gnarly features on it, not just, you know, steep lipped kind of BMX style dirt jumps. All that said though, the bike obviously is 27.5 inch front and back and has pretty short 425 mil chain stays. So it still is relatively playful. It's nothing like the, you know, On One Hello Dave or other bikes like that that are much more catered towards just straight up like straight line speed and enduro racing. This bike really is a great middle ground, you know, all around hardtail. So that's some info on the frame. Let's talk a little bit about the part spec I have on here. And pretty much I've done very little to change what came on this bike from Marin when they sent it to me. It came with a mixed Dior SLX drivetrain, which is great. Some 4-piston Shimano 420 brakes, which have worked awesome. One thing I will say about that drivetrain is yes, you get, I believe it's a Dior shifter SLX derailleur. Oh, I just missed that skinny. Got too distracted. Dior shifter SLX derailleur, but You do have, I believe it's a Sunrace cassette. So you don't have that Hyperglide cassette, which in theory would make this bike not shift as well. Shimano does a lot of, puts a lot of machining into that cassette to help ramp up the chain. And supposedly, Sunrace wouldn't be as good. That said, the shifts on this bike have been super crisp. Like, I haven't ridden like XT stuff, but I have ridden GX, and honestly, I would say the shifting on this bike is comparable to the shifting on a GX setup, which is pretty crazy on a $2,000 hardtail. Another part spec that I'm really impressed by is that Marin has gone ahead and spec'd these bikes with really long dropper posts. You probably know already that another big geo feature of this bike is the ridiculously short seat tubes. This size extra large has like a 410 or 415 mil seat tube, which lets you get that seat totally out of the way. Again, another thing that makes this bike a potentially good option for someone who is more interested in kind of the free riding or trials even. But Marin has gone ahead and put on this XL frame, it comes with a 200 mil dropper post. An interesting spec choice is that this bike comes with Maxxis Assegai tires. If you're not familiar with those, it's pretty much the most aggressive tire that Maxxis makes. And I think it again speaks to the fact that this bike is more catered towards, you know, enduro riding, free riding than it is dirt jumping. First time I rode this bike on those Assegais, man, I felt like someone had put like tar on my tires or rubber cement or something, because it was just like sticking to the ground, super slow. I was coming off some kind of mid-weight Bontrager XR4 trail tires, which are real fast rolling, and these Assegais have a lot of grip, but it's tough to climb on them, and similarly, it's hard to maintain speed on a pump track or through a line of dirt jumps because they really just dig into the ground. So that's more of a personal preference thing, and really everything else on this bike I have no complaints about. I've been very impressed with how nice it rides for being, you know, a relatively value-oriented hardtail. Again, it's less than $2,000. And if you're interested in this bike, just a quick shameless plug, Wendy and I are brand ambassadors for Bikes Online, and they're an authorized Marin dealer. I'm gonna put the link to this bike, it's an affiliate link down in the description. It will cost you no more, but if you were to want to buy this bike and you bought it from that link in the description, we're gonna get a small kickback, and that'll just help us be able to afford to make more cool videos like this, review more products, go on trips. So I'd really appreciate that. Oh, look, we found some snow. That's fun. There is one kind of big spec change that I have done to this bike. The very astute observers of you may have already noticed that at the beginning of the video with some of the B-roll, but I'm gonna wait to tell you guys about that until we get to the top of this climb and I'm coming back down. So let's go ahead and skip to the descent right now. All right, made it to the descent, which means I can tell you guys about the one big spec change that I have made to this bike, and that is to turn it into a mullet. So I went ahead and took off the stock 27.5 inch Marzocchi bomber fork that was on here, put on a 29 inch Fox 36, and 29 front wheel, obviously. And this has done a couple things. For one, it slackened that head tube just a little bit more. I measured it, and it turned out to be, oh, someone cleared a tree out there. That's nice of them. Ended up being about 1 degree slacker. Oh, they didn't take this tree out. That's what happens when you ride trails early season, guys. Thanks to all the trail workers who do come in and clear this stuff. Head tube angle, 1 degree slacker. And obviously that mullet setup has helped with trail speed, with rollover, all that good stuff. But another thing it's done is raise the bottom bracket, which I have been super stoked about. This bike does climb well, but it would get a a lot of pedal strikes. And of course you could remedy that with shorter cranks, and it's also made the front end of this bike come up a lot easier. Having a higher bottom bracket, or at least less bottom bracket drop, makes manuals, bunny hops, stuff like that easier. So that's been awesome. And to be honest, it really enhances both characteristics of this bike, both the kind of high speed enduro side of things, but also the playfulness. So if you're thinking about buying this bike, I would highly recommend molding it. Haha, makes it a ton better. Oh, good stuff. You. Oh, dang, that was a little bigger than I thought. Should have taken that with a little more speed. But this bike did just fine. That was dope. You know what? I think that's a good spot for our little I rode this on a hardtail thing. That's what do you say? Maybe a 3-foot drop. I realize you can't see that right now. Let me switch to the camera. Just setting this guy. Probably about a 3-foot drop. You know, like hip high. We're gonna go ahead and put our little I rode this on a hardtail right here. There it is. There's a sign. Hopefully you can see it. We're gonna go ahead and put it, I don't know, maybe right here. This is a cool spot for it. Hopefully there's no giant evil spiders under any of these rocks. Here we go. Hopefully you can see it. We'll grab some B-roll of it too. As you can see, this bike also corners really well, which comes from having those smaller wheels. And I think with the mullet, you don't really lose that cornering prowess. The bike still leans over super well, and these Assegai tires, they grip in these corners great. Again, this is pretty much hero dirt that I'm in right now. So sick. Yeah, see this bike? Oh, it's got that perfect combination of like handling the chunk, but then still playful enough to like gap off those little rocks. And yeah, you could carry more speed through this on a full suspension bike, but if you're a decently competent rider, man, it just comes alive on a hardtail. I feel like you can kind of float above it versus just like sinking into it, you know? It's a really cool feeling. Oh. All right, well, I think that's about the end of the fun stuff. And man, guys, this is a good bike. So if you've got questions for me on this bike, other things you want to know about, you're curious, buy it yourself, let me know. I'm happy to answer those. And again, it would do me a huge favor if you chose to buy this bike from Bikes Online, because we'll get a little bit of a thank you from them, which we'll put right back in the channel, making cool videos like this. So if you do like this type of content, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and then once you've done that, get out for a ride, and hopefully I'll see you on the trail.